If you're using heat press to make t-shirts either at home or in your business, there's a lot of different ways to get that finished product. Bunch of different types of transfers. One of the oldest and most tried and true would be heat transfer vinyl. The cool thing about heat transfer vinyl these days is there's a whole bunch of different specialty materials. I've used glow in the dark, I've used flock, metallic, glitter. There's just so many different things to choose from. Now, one that I've really wanted to try for the longest is Siser Brick 600. And the thing that I really liked about the Brick 600 is it had a certain thickness to it. And it sort of has like a rubberized feel to it. It's like a soft rubber. I really just never got around to buying any to test. Recently, I finally picked some up and I really like it. For me, what I want to use the Brick 600 for is hats. I do a lot of hats in my business. I do dye sublimation hats. I do some hats with DTF transfers and some with heat transfer vinyl. And a big limitation about using heat transfers on a hat would be that you basically need to use a 5-panel hat most of the time. The problem with using a 6-panel hat, which is the most common type of hat, is there's a seam right down the middle. And most of the heat transfer materials just don't look good on it because they're too thin. And you can see that seam right through your design. And it just looks bad every time. So with the brick, that's going to change that. Same thing with using patches. You can use patches on hats. And those are just fine on 6-panel hats. But if you're using like a standard heat transfer vinyl or even something like a metallic, it's just never going to look good. This is a hat that I just made with the Brick 600. So we'll jump back in time, go through the process, and we'll see how I got to that finished product. This is my design that I'm going to use to cut out with the Brick 600 and put onto a hat. You don't want a design that has too much fine detail. So you want something where you're not going to have to worry about all of these little in-between things like the inside of these P's. And hopefully this works. I'll do 2 different versions. So what I'm going to do is take this into my hat template file, and this is just basically the area that can be pressed on my heat press, measured out in inches. So we'll just put that in there and make it fit within that box. We'll just give it a little bit on the top and bottom. And then I have an SVG file that I use to send this to my Silhouette Studio software. There's a plugin where you can cut from Adobe Illustrator. I don't use that. I have another cutter, a Graphtec, that I can cut directly from Illustrator. But for now, I just put everything in this file that I named Cutter SVG, and then I just open it in Silhouette Studio when I need it. So we'll paste this in here, and we're going to make a copy of that. And then I'm going to take out this little design supply part, just in case the detail is a little too fine. And then what I need to do here is we'll take this off the artboard so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to take the type and change that to outlines. And then I'm going to go to Object, Expand Appearance, Object, Expand. Then click OK for Fill and Stroke. Object, Expand. And then what I need to do is go here to this Pathfinder and Merge. And now if I send this to my cutter like this, it's going to try to cut all of the lines for the black parts. And then it's going to cut over those lines for the white parts. And then that's where you can run into trouble. It'll cut right through the backing sheet on your vinyl. So what I'm going to do is use my direct selection tool, select anything white, then select same fill color, delete that. And then one more step I'm going to take is I'm going to make a box and make it have no fill color or stroke color. And then I'll just do select same fill color. That's just to make sure that there's no hidden lines here that don't have a color assigned to them. So then I can move these back onto my artboard. I'm going to make a rectangle around these. And what that's going to do is, imagine this whole white board here is my sheet of vinyl. If I don't have anything like this bounding box here, what'll happen is it'll cut these out and I can cut the vinyl here, but I'll have to try to peel from this corner up, and that can be a little bit of a pain. So it's always nice to have just a box in the center. And then I'm going to also separate these with a line, and that way it'll cut this
box, it'll cut the designs and it'll cut this line down the middle. And that way, if I want, I can just weed out one of these designs and save the other one for later and weed that later or whatever. So I'm going to save this file. Then I'm going to go into Silhouette Studio and open that file up. And I just want to make sure that everything is up here at the top of my artboard because that's where it's going to cut. Then when I go to the Send tab, I already have a preset made for this Siser Brick 600. I start with the heat transfer flock preset. Make sure my blade depth is 10, my force is 10, 1 pass, and speed of 4. And then I'm going to just send this right over. And it's going to ask me if I want to send this mirrored. And yes, I do want to send this mirrored. So I'll cut this out. I'll weed it off camera, and then we'll get to pressing the hat. You already know the deal. The cutter's going to do its thing. We're going to take it off and weed it. Then we're just going to jump right over to the press. Now, the interesting thing about the Brick 600 is the backing isn't sticky like you'd normally expect with other types of heat transfer vinyl. So I use some of this heat resistant tape to hold it in place. Otherwise, it's going to move when you're adjusting your heating element and all of that stuff. So it's really important to do that if you're using the Brick 600. Another thing is that the fine detail was a problem, like I talked about when I was showing you the file. I ended up having to fight with the little inside part of the R, and that was a real pain, especially with the backing not being sticky like other heat transfer vinyl. So I definitely recommend doing bolder designs with bigger areas so you don't have to worry about all these little things not cutting quite all the way through and being a problem. The Brick 600 peels cold, so after you press it, you're just going to basically need to wait until your transfer cools down before you peel it up. Otherwise, it's not going to adhere properly, but waiting is just fine. Now, I ended up having it cut a little bit through my backing, so I had some pieces that didn't peel up when I peeled up the rest of the backing off of the design. I'm definitely going to need to play with my settings and get something that works really good on all different types of designs. But overall, I think this was like a pretty good experience considering I've only made a couple of hats with this so far. This is actually my third hat that I've made with the Brick 600. Once you know how to work with heat transfer vinyl, it's all pretty much the same, except some of the materials feel a little bit different. Some of them have different pressing instructions and cutting instructions, but the general process is the same no matter what you're doing. And this is what the final product looks like. It's really nice on these 6-panel hats that it covers that seam in the middle without really having the look of the seam show through the transfer. I'm glad that I gave this a try, and I think that it's something I can make some money with.